Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a mission that is, well, it's deeply personal and pretty counterintuitive.
It really is.
We're talking about taking the biggest pain points in your life, the wounds, the setbacks, all the things you instinctively run from,
Mm.
and understanding how they are, in fact, the most valuable sources of growth you have.
It's all about transformation. I mean,
Mm.
our default setting is always to seek comfort, right?
Yeah.
To numb things, to retreat.
Sure.
But the big shift, the thing that teacher Henry Schuckman points out, is that there's a blessing in going into our wounds. He says deep wounds can be the path to great living.
It's a beautiful thing when the wound becomes the doorway.
A doorway, not a wall.
That distinction is everything, isn't it? We are so hardwired to build walls around anything difficult.
Yeah, we want to bypass the friction.
But all of these sources we've looked at, they tell us to do the exact opposite, to move toward the difficult.
With presence, with intention. So I think our whole discussion today is about that one pivotal moment.
Okay.
We want to show you how to take that raw material of brokenness, the wound, and turn it into a doorway to a much deeper life.
Okay, let's start with that conditioned response, because I think everyone feels it. When something really hard hits, the first instinct is to fall back into a pattern.
A self-limiting one, yeah.
Yeah,
Our sources actually have a name for it. They call it the VRBS.
the VRBS.
Yeah, VERBS. It's the common choreography of avoidance. When something bad happens, we instantly become the victim.
And from there, we feel entitled to better.
Entitled to better, exactly. And then we just sit back, waiting to be rescued. And when that doesn't happen,
You blame everyone else.
blame everyone but yourself.
Why is that pattern so seductive? I mean, on the surface, it seems so obviously destructive, but we all fall into it.
Because being the victim gives you this powerful illusion of protection. For a moment, anyway.
It lets you off the hook.
It lets you off the hook. If you're a victim of circumstance, you feel like you're exempt from the hard work of actually fixing the problem. You trade your power for, toxic comfort.
So it's not really comfort at all, it's stagnation.
Right.
It reminds me of that Richard Bach quote, argue for your limitations, and sure enough, they're yours.
That's it, exactly. You're creating the very prison you're afraid of being trapped in.
A self-fulfilling prophecy.
This avoidance, this failure to take responsibility, it connects to one of the most, sobering definitions of moral failure I've ever read.
Oh, yeah.
James F. Keenan. He suggests that real failure isn't found where people are weak, but they're still trying.
Okay, that's not what you'd expect. Most of us think of moral failure as weakness.
Right, but Keenan says failure happens where people are strong and not bothering.
Wow.
He says sin is a failure to bother to love. And if you think about the VRBS, it makes perfect sense.
Waiting to be rescued, blaming others.
You're strong enough to act, but you're choosing not to. You're choosing indifference. And that is the ultimate way to avoid the wound.
So we've established the wall, avoidance, entitlement, indifference. But pivoting away from that takes more than just willpower.
It takes training.
Yeah.
Psychological and, almost physical training.
So if the VERBS are the wall, how do we start building that doorway?
It starts with inner flexibility. And to get that, it's useful to look at people who operate under huge pressure, like elite athletes.
Okay.
Pia Nelson and Lynn Marriott have this great way of reframing it. They say, play is power. Power is play. Have fun and win.
Have fun, and winning usually takes care of itself. It's about mindset.
It is. They say you could either play frustrated and afraid, or you can play motivated and engaged. And the key verb for moving toward the wound is embrace.
Embrace fears and drown them in kindness.
Drown them in kindness. Now, I know some people listening might hear that and think, wait a second, isn't that just a psychological bypass? Just thinking positive?
That's a fair question.
But the difference is flexibility versus force. When you try to crush fear with willpower, you tense up. You lose your agility.
Ah.
Kindness, straight as it sounds, lets you stay loose, responsive, present.
Yeah.
And that softness is actually a kind of resilience.
Which brings us to those three capacities from Siddhartha for weathering life storms.
Exactly. The first two are pretty straightforward. I can think, meaning you have rational rules for making decisions instead of just panicking.
And I can wait, playing the long game, not making desperate moves.
But the third one is the most important for what we're talking about today. I can fast.
And this isn't just about food.
No, not at all. It's the core training for resilience. It's about consciously building your ability to withstand difficulty, training your pain tolerance so hardship doesn't just knock you over.
Can you give us a modern, practical example of I can fast? Something that's not, monastic.
Sure. Think about getting a really frustrating email.
Okay, yeah.
The VRBS instinct is to immediately fire back this entitled blaming response.
Mm.
Fasting, in this context, is the ability to wait just 5 minutes, to feel that frustration, to sit with it, and then choose a strategic response. You're delaying comfort for a better outcome.
That makes it so clear. And part of that is fighting our cultural addiction to speed, which is just another form of avoidance, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Here's this practice instruction we found that says it all. What is the fastest I can? What is the fastest I can't? When I move half as fast, I take in twice as much.
Slowing down is an act of courage. It forces you to stop running past the discomfort and actually see the wound.
And when you slow down, when you stay present, you unlock your most powerful tool,
Your mind.
your mind. And it's not just a passive observer, it is actively shaping your reality.
William James said it right. Believe that life is worth living, and your belief will help create the fact. But how does that actually work when you're in a real crisis?
It creates the frame. It creates the path forward. If you believe it's impossible, you stop looking for a way out. That's the VRBS.
Right.
But if you believe life is worth living, you look for the next step. Tony Dungy talked about the Apostle Paul, who faced just constant brutal suffering. And Paul could endure it because his mind was fixed on one of two acceptable outcomes. Either he'd continue his painful service, or he'd die and be with Christ. Neither one was a failure.
So his mind was an instrument of vision. You can endure anything if you can frame your suffering as part of a higher purpose.
And the wound loses its power to paralyze you. But this requires a really radical acceptance of what life is.
We spend so much energy trying to find this state of permanent calm.
But Kelly Corrigan gives us this necessary reminder. She writes, minds don't rest. They reel and wonder and fixate.
Hearts don't idle. They swell and constrict and break and forgive.
And then comes the crucial breakthrough. She says, it's like this, having a life.
That's it. The difficulty isn't a deviation from the plan. It is the plan.
Exactly. When you stop fighting the unrest, the wound stops being a surprise attack. It just becomes the messy, demanding, beautiful texture of being human.
And if difficulty is the texture of life, you can see why avoiding it early on causes such generational damage.
This brings us to Ryan Holiday's critique of historical avoidance, especially in parenting.
It's kind of shocking to read about how common it was in Europe for the wealthy to just delegate the hardest years of a child's life.
It really is. I mean, Montaigne was sent to live with villagers as an infant. Jane Austen's mother handed her kids off after a month.
The aristocratic class just actively avoided the sleepless nights, the hard work.
They were applying the VRBS.
Yeah.
They felt entitled to their ease, so they outsourced the labor.
Right.
They told themselves they'd connect later, when it was easier.
And the price they paid was devastating. They severed the most important bond at the most critical time.
There's that old expression, give me the first 6 years,
Yeah.
and you can have the rest.
And they did the exact opposite.
They missed the entire foundational window.
And as Holiday says, now is when it matters most. Now is when it counts. The earlier, the better.
The foundation is the hardest part. You have to show up when you're tired, when you're stressed, when the rewards aren't immediate.
It connects back to what John Locke said about learning, doesn't it? The greatest art of learning is to understand but little at a time.
You can't rush it. You can't skip the hard foundational steps without inheriting a much deeper wound down the line.
So that brings us full circle, really. It expands the view from just personal resilience to the ultimate doorway. Service. Dr. Cornel West asks this piercing question. What do you do after you become a success?
Because individual success, he argues, is just the starting point. True greatness is using that success for service to others, specifically service to the least of these.
It's about willingly moving toward the wounds of the world, not just your own.
And he has this powerful phrase for those who don't. He calls them people who are well-adjusted to injustice.
Wow. That's one of the most sophisticated ways of avoiding a wound, isn't it? Convincing yourself you've earned the right to look away.
Absolutely. To make sure it's not just an abstract idea, West lists exactly who the least of these are. The orphan, the widow, the poor, children, the elderly, workers, gays and lesbians, trans people, black folk, brown folk, the white poor, and indigenous peoples.
It's a comprehensive, urgent call to action.
It is a call to act against all forms of avoidance.
And why go there? What's the reward for moving toward that kind of collective pain?
West says the whole purpose is laying bare the humanity of each and every one of us. When you approach the wound with courage, it reveals our shared connection.
And that connection gives you the why, the higher calling.
Which is exactly what Dave Ramsey talks about. He said higher calling matters. When you care so deeply about the why, then and only then are you operating in a way that allows you to overcome the obstacles.
The obstacle stops being something to run from.
Right. It becomes a necessary part of the path to a greater purpose.
So we've laid out the two paths, the walls of avoidance built from the VERBS, and the doorways opened by presence, kindness, and service.
And the fundamental shift is about redefining what you value.
Which brings us to a simple mathematical truth our sources pointed to, the happiness equation.
Yeah, it says happiness equals wanting what you have, divided by having what you want.
Which means the core instruction from all of this is want less to have more.
Exactly. Want less comfort, less speed, less ease, and in return, you end up having so much more life, more purpose, more resilience.
It's that realization that a ship in port is safe, but...
As John A. Shedd said, that's not what ships are built for. You are built for the voyage, for the storms.
The soccer player Pirlo said that the game is played with the brain, the feet are just the tools, life is played with your whole self.
Yeah, with your intentional mind.
You just can't bypass the work. I think John Baptiste summed up this entire deep dive in the simplest way. You have to go there to know there. The doorway is only accessible by walking right through the wound.
And that willingness to move toward difficulty, it changes everything about your relationship with being alive.
So here's the final provocative thought to leave you with. Mark Twain observed that the fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time.
Wow.
So what specific difficulties are you avoiding right now? What wounds are you circling that might, if you had the courage to finally enter them, prepare you to truly live?